I have to thank Adeline because I start climate change fiction since 2011, and I feel very honored to be able to sit beside her. Okay, my first sentence is actually a quote from Adeline's work. Oh, now I agree. Okay, so as you can see, climate change somehow is not here, but it's here. It's somehow it's inside you, right? Okay. In their 2011 essay, Climate Change in Literature and Literary Criticism, Adam Tressler and Adeline Jones-Putra claimed Arthur Herzog's Heat is the first novel to engage directly with what we now call climate change in the 1970s. Unlike J.G. Balla's speculative fiction, The Drowned World, that describes a post-apocalyptic world caused by the disturbances of Van Allen belts, Herzog's Heat articulates signs and symptoms of climate change due to emission of carbon dioxide, which is the culprit leading to climate change and other social problems. At the outset of Herzog's Heat, actually he cites another critic, and then I quote, "A man is not yet in nature's league as a potent climate regulating force. He is almost certainly destined to become such a force in their rather near future. Therefore, it is a matter of some urgency that we identify the causes of modern-day climate instability and make an accurate determination of man's impact on world climate, both present and future," end quote. Without a doubt, the tone here is apocalyptic, and its content is also germane to the current Anthropocene discussion. In 2000, Paul Cruzen and Eugene Stomer first used the Anthropocene as a geological term to denote the, I quote, "the central role of mankind in geology and ecology," end quote. In the 2002 essay, Geology of Mankind, Cruzen defines the term Anthropocene as the present human-dominated geological epoch, meaning that the terraforming capability of the humankind in the wake of the Industrial Revolution can lead to environmental changes. He points out that the Anthropocene age was activated when James Watt first invented the steam engine in 1784, the year that marks the prelude of the age of humankind. For Cruzen and Stomer, humans are a major geological force. Therefore, they are expected to shoulder the responsibility to battle against these human-induced stresses as one of the great future tasks of man. This line of remedial thinking is similar to what environmental sociologists such as Nicholas Luhmann, Ulrich Beck, Bruno Latour had to say in their risk analysis of our environmental hazards. In response to Cruzen's observations of the Anthropocene, post-colonial historian Depesh Chakrabarty argues that Cruzen's idea of periodization is mutant, and that the erosion of age or distance or boundary between species is always problematic. Unlike Chakrabarty's anthropocentric critique of the Anthropocene, Dana Haraway comes up with such terms as capitalocene or plantationocene and Solucene to destabilize the predominance of the Anthropocene by making kin with the significant non-human others. So this is my introduction. And then I will talk about, actually this paper is not so, the scope is a little bit small. It's my reading of the novel. And I try to use Timothy Morton's ideas of hyperobject to reinterpret, to reread Herzl's novel. Since I read climate change fiction on and off in 2011, and now I think that I can find a pattern of it. So now I think that this is quite interesting. So for Morton, now what is a hyperobject? For Morton, hyperobject can be natural or man-made, global warming, oil fields, the biosphere, the solar system. The solar system, plastic bags, and capitalism all are regarded as hyperobjects that are responsible for the end of the world as we know it. In the ecological thought, Morton first coined the term hyperobject to invoke a terror beyond the sublime. However, a hyperobject is not to be confused with the sublime object. Hyperobjects are geological. They do not rot in our lifetimes. They are even more real than reality, a strange stranger. In hyperobject philosophy and ecology, at the end of the world, Timothy Morton resumes his discussion of hyperobject by equipping hyperobjects with more theoretical vigor. Morton's theories of hyperobject is an object-oriented approach to the material agency of objects. Other practitioners of this critical perspective being Harman, Latour, Bryan, and so on and so forth. Among these critics, Morton and Harman are allies. Both subscribe to the idea that objective withdrawnness, like that of an octopus withdrawing itself in the shadow after ejecting out their ink. So now I will talk about the definitions of hyperobject. The first characteristics of a hyperobject is viscosity. It's very sticky. A hyperobject is near and far, intimate and extimate, here and there, albeit its elusiveness, withdrawnness, and paradoxicality. A hyperobject is agentic, capable of doing work, creating an aesthetic of cause and effect. Similarly, as a hyperobject, global warming also has this uncanny quality. You don't like it, but it is always already here. Since we are inside hyperobject, no matter or beyond, we need to learn how to enjoy our symptoms. For example, we sweat a lot, and then you have to enjoy it in the age of climate change. The second characteristic of hyperobject is non-local or non-locality. Hyperobjects are border crossers, crossing the local and the global and creating effects and effects. Global warming, oil fields, toxic chemicals, and other hyperobjects perform actions at a distance. Thus, non-locality steers away from the first wave of critical local centrism, opening a more profound interconnectedness, entanglement, and species co-belonging. Thus, the concept of non-locality goes beyond the local. For Morton, global warming is geographically and temporally distributed, hence it's dispersed and non-local. The third characteristic of a hyperobject is temporal undulation. Space is not an empty container. No, time is a meaningless vessel. Time and space, like the other undulating curtain in a theater, can have rippling effects. Thanks to Einstein, I quote, the discovery of space-time shows that the undulating fronts of space and time float in front of object, and that there is an undulating force field emanating from objects. And then the fourth characteristics of hyperobject is phasing. Hyperobjects are real and transdimensional, unable to be reframed in the nutshell. In Morton's words, hyperobjects seem to phase in and out of the human world. Like the many manifestations of nature or the moon's phases, it is impossible to see them as a whole. For example, if you have a girlfriend or wife, and she will say, "You cannot have me," or something like that. I'm just kidding. You cannot have all of me, something like that. In Lacan's words, the object is an adult set with invisible remainders, because life is not so romantic. We have a lot of symptoms. And then the fifth and final characteristics of hyperobject is interobjectivity. That is, the creation of a shared space in which human meaning resonates. Since objects are like members in a set, they though withdrawn from each other, still interact with each other to avoid the pitfalls of intersubjectivity that excludes human. Interobjectivity is positive. Interestingly, instead of using French sociologist Bruno Latour's concept of interobjectivity, actually they are enemies and friends. Morton and Latour. So Morton here turns to Kent Wilber for help to run down his argument of interobjectivity as a system of related objects. More importantly, Morton's interobjectivity is connectionist, not interactionist. So now I will begin analyze the novel Herzog's Hint. In the prologue, Herzog used a newspaper story to convey a feeling of the uncanny. When global warming starts to have a causal relation, I quote, "The ocean, generous then, but selfish now," end quote. Due to rise of sea temperature, the fishermen were flabbergasted about the harvest being so scanty. And here is a dialogue, I quote, "What has God done?" Tito asked. The fish must be diseased," the host said. "Some strange condition of the seawater," another gentleman suggested. Tito shrugged, and he stared with fascination at the apparition. It had almost stopped moving. "It is a very horrible fish. When bright red, I do not like it." For Herzog, the dialogue of this pertinacious or girl's ear, the fish looks spectral and horrible, and the fishermen are haunted by its stickiness and sliminess. On top of that, Herzog also provides another newspaper coverage to illustrate the viscosity of oil spill hyperobject. Hyperobject, like strange strangers, are uncanny, gothic, and sticky. The main character of the novel is Lawrence Pig. In order to solve the political, social, and ethical problems of global warming, Pig, together with members of Crisis, jointly make efforts in disaster prevention and treatment. Lawrence Pig is a scientist who is entrusted a daunting task to deal with the impending abrupt climate change. Raised on a farm in northeastern Pennsylvania, Pig is more ecological minded. Usually we think that science fiction doesn't have any characterization because a lot of people think that science fiction is not so interesting. There is no character analysis, but I think this one is quite interesting. And Pig was 40 years old, undeniably handsome, with a square jaw, a long straight nose, large black eyes, and a wide mouth that characteristically drooped slightly at the corners when he was upset. And Pig was a double master in engineering and environmental science, well-versed in ecology, space travel, energy technology, computers, advanced engineering. Pig is also deputy director of Crisis, and the acronym means Crisis Research Investigation and System Evaluation Service, a respected body as well as a member of the International Council of Scientific Unions. And then Higgs' job is to identify, study, and warn of potential environmental hazards. When the weather becomes unstable, Higgs organizes a team of scientists, including Klein, the chemist Baxter, the meteorologist Philly, the hurricane expert, and Anderson, the climatologist. In Herschel's hands, climate change is full of uncertainties, and Higgs used computer models to gauge its different phases and possible ways of mitigation from condition green to condition winners, from Earth 1 to Earth 6. Earth 6 means condition winners. So now, some interesting things happen. Although working at the same institution, Higgs and his boss, Rufus Edmondson, are not like-minded. And the former is a climate believer, while the latter is a climate skeptic. Ironically, as director of crisis, Edmondson should have believed his own motto that the future is our own responsibility. In the novel, of course, this is not the case. In the novel, Edmondson is depicted as temperamental, a thin, almost bird-like figure with scrawny arms and legs and long white hair, who jeers at Higgs more often than not. I quote, "If you cannot find a catastrophe to worry about for this year, then you will find out in the coming centuries. Larry, you look tired. You should take a vacation." For Edmondson, Higgs is a Cassandra figure. When Higgs, with the aid of the supercomputer, confirms that the emissions of CO2 will result in climate symptoms, and Edmondson pokes fun at him, saying that it's just like you to make impossibility and a spin one, in my view, into a probability, even a certainty. Edmondson does not believe in the Cassonian rhetoric, namely fable of tomorrow or silent spring. For him, Higgs' environmental rhetoric is apocalyptic all the time. I quote, "Morning, Larry. Nice day, isn't it? Sun's out. Birds are singing. Taste of spring. How wonderful it is." In an age of hyperobjects, Edmondson and Bender are actually, for me, cynics, because we think that they outwit Higgs. They are the subjects supposed to know. Morton used a part of a joke to illustrate this point. Then I quote, this is an interesting story, joke. A small boy runs in front of a coming truck. You watch in horror as you realize the truck can't slow down in time. You think you should save the boy, but you are unsure. For Morton, isn't this precisely the situation we are in when confronted with hyperobject or climate change? Here, an ethical decision is to be made, to save or not to save. If the you chooses to save, we usually make a similar decision. An ethical action then is taken. If the you chooses not to save, he then becomes a cynic. The logic of cynicism for Morton is, since no one person's action will solve global warming, better to do nothing. Or, at most, wait for the revolution to come. A cynic harbors an attitude of pure becoming floating in a void. Thus, cynicism is associated with do-nothingism or defeatism. Nothing happened, result, global warming continues, good. In the end of this satisfaction, McGowan points out that cynics are smart and will not be duped. Cynics can see through things with the belief that they are truly enlightened. Subjects. However, the core idea of contemporary cynicism for Sloterdijk is is characterized by an enlightened false consciousness that takes away the distance between self and other. A cynic can feel secure in his or her knowledge of the other. Nuclear physicist Joseph Banner is the president's science advisor. He is 55 years old, vain, stubborn, arrogant, and optimistic. His ambition is to become president of Harvard University and later became a senator. However, everything falls flat. Both Edmondson and Banner share that they can traverse the fantasy of political ideology. For them, a greenhouse summer will not happen. By breaking the news of climate change, they think that the president can win the election. Here, the politics of climate change is involved. It has to do with the presidential election. So, because no GGs, no YBists will be running out. In McGowan's words, they are climate cynics, the unenlightened enlightened. More importantly, Edmondson and Banner have a jaundiced view toward those environmentalists because they will make noble savages of the American people. They don't like, environmental rhetoric. So now, my conclusion. Like Zizek, Deleuze, and Latour, Morton criticized end-time ideology, apocalyptic thinking, and the denial of material agency in climatic skepticism. Morton believes that, I quote, global warming is here, even more spookily. It was already here. Hyperobjects are futural, not fake concrete, like messages in bottles from the future. Pick, though himself a victim of false accusation, paid off in the end because of his personal conviction that human survival cannot be taken for granted. And he stepped into Banner's shoes and became a new science advisor to mitigate the impending climate change with two basic thrusts. For one thing, Pick, with the aid of disaster sociologist Dr. Harwood, plans to re-educate and indoctrinate the American people, such as anti-commercialism, the avoidance of frivolous consumption of energy, business as usual attitude, and the pursuit of a simpler existence for another. He establishes a new energy task force to fight against thermal pollution. For a historical hindsight, I think his solution sounds deep ecological, but his critique of the Anthropocene is greater. So my conclusion is, the purpose of my object-oriented approach to global warming is threefold. Number one, go beyond correlationism. Number two, the envisioning of a speculative realism. Number three, things themselves have their own material agencies. Thank you.